The Bogosity Podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity Podcast for the week of February 23, 2025. The podcast that's doing it all for my baby. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's airify the news of the bogus. Given all the screeching that's been making our ears bleed this past week, apparently some things need to be made clear. We've been hearing all over social media from the left spewing their prepared talking points given to them by who knows, that Elon Musk doesn't have authority to fire anyone, no one elected him, Congress didn't approve of him, and so on. Unless you've been hiding under a rock while wearing noise-canceling headphones, and who could blame you, you've been hearing all of this. By the end of this segment, you will know far more than any of these morons do. I mean, you probably already do, but we'll lay it all out. So a lot of this is surrounding activities of the USDS, the United States Doge Service, formerly the United States Digital Service, as well as the US Doge Service temporary organization that operates underneath it, what Elon Musk's role is, and how he has the authority to do anything. New Mexico has filed suit against Elon Musk, saying that he has performed significant governmental duties despite not being officially nominated by Trump and confirmed by the Senate. 13 other states have joined in. Joshua Fisher, the director of the Office of Administration, has filed a declaration in the case clarifying all of this in a way that should be clear to any reasonable person, which leaves out the plaintiffs in this case and many others because they don't care about any of this, really. They just want to stop Trump any way they can, and that includes using their buddies in the judiciary to violate separation of powers to do it. He wrote, Mr. Musk is an employee of the White House office. He holds that position as a non-career special government employee. In that job, Mr. Musk is a senior advisor to the president. It is not uncommon for the president to have senior advisors who are SGEs. For instance, Anita Dunn was an influential senior advisor to President Biden while serving as an SGE. In his role as a senior advisor to the president, Mr. Musk has no greater authority than other senior White House advisors. Like other senior White House advisors, Mr. Musk has no actual or formal authority to make government decisions himself. Mr. Musk can only advise the president and communicate the president's directives. The U.S. Doge Service is a component of the Executive Office of the President. The U.S. Doge Service temporary organization is within the U.S. Doge Service. Both are separate from the White House office. Mr. Musk is an employee in the White House office. He is not an employee of the U.S. Doge Service or U.S. Doge Service temporary organization. Mr. Musk is not the U.S. Doge Service administrator. So there you are. No need to keep screeching, right? Meanwhile, Doge is stepping things up thanks to a pair of new executive orders that are supposed to, in Javier Milei style, take a chainsaw to federal regulations. And this seems to have a lot more teeth than Trump's mealy-mouthed deregulation rhetoric the first time around. The first EO orders agency heads to review all of their regulations and identify, quote, unconstitutional regulations and regulations that raise serious constitutional difficulties. Well, that's going to be most of them. I guess we'll see how many agencies have actually read the Constitution. Quote, regulations that are based on unlawful delegations of legislative power. And that's a problem we've covered quite a bit. Congress just throws off its legislative powers to the executive and says, you guys take care of it. Hey, beats actually being held accountable by the people. Likewise, quote, regulations that are based on anything other than the best reading of the underlying statutory authority or prohibition, and regulations that implicate matters of social, political, or economic significance that are not authorized by clear statutory authority. In other words, stop just making up crap by executive order. Most of what Biden, Obama, Clinton, and both Bushes did would be eviscerated under this if they did their jobs properly. Two more really significant ones, quote, regulations that harm the national interest by significantly and unjustifiably impeding technological innovation, infrastructure development, disaster response, inflation reduction, research and development, economic development, energy production, land use, and foreign policy objectives, and regulations that impose undue burdens on small business and impede private enterprise and entrepreneurship. If you've ever tried to run a business, you'll know that this will make a major part of the federal government implode if it's actually followed. As for that, it does say, quote, nothing in this order shall apply to any action related to a military, national security, homeland security, foreign affairs, or immigration-related function of the United States, any matter pertaining to the executive branch's management of its employees, or anything else exempted by the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. In other words, it will if they feel like it. The other one is nicely titled, Commencing the Reduction of the Federal Bureaucracy. Quote, the non-statutory components and functions of the following governmental entities shall be eliminated to the maximum extent consistent with applicable law, and such entities shall reduce the performance of their statutory functions and associated personnel to the minimum presence and function required by law. The Presidio Trust, the Inter-American Foundation, the United States African Development Foundation, and the United States Institute of Peace. Not much, but I guess you have to start somewhere. Of course, the only way consistent with his oath of office would be to extend this to all departments and governmental entities. Still, it's good to see at least some real cuts, as opposed to the not raising it as much but calling it a cuts Republicans have been notorious for in the past. So Rand Paul proposed Paul Amendment number 999 to the budget bill to cut federal spending by at least $1.5 trillion. But sadly, as Justin Amash reported on X, Rand Paul's amendment was defeated 24-76. Nothing has changed. Republicans praise DOGE publicly, and then they vote for more spending when you're not paying attention. 29 Republicans joined every single Democrat in voting this down, including both of my useless senators from North Carolina. As they said in the X-Files, I want to believe. But in spite of all the amazing things that have been done, it's just a drop in the bucket so far, and the rest have either failed or just have too many caveats. We'll see, I suppose.
Sometimes you just have to stomp some skulls. From the mind of Mr. Dapperton, a game for the ages. In a world where a race of undead furries tries to take over the world's nuclear arsenal, one man must stop them. But which man? You choose. The Orange Overlord.
Oh, my ear!
Bernie Slanders. Debate Dominator.
My kippa's ruined!
Or Joe Sleepy.
Build me back.
And of course, Mr. Fancy Pants himself.
Forget those losers! You can get the Gold Edition and play as 4 more characters, including me, the Spooky Spaceman, along with Billionaire Brat, Professor Proof, and the easiest way to play, as Jesus himself!
7 complete different worlds, with more coming all the time. Full controller support. You can even get eaten by a worm and pooped out into a furry cathedral.
And don't forget that Gold Edition, where you can play the ultimate challenge, Devil's Doorstep.
This gory satirical adventure pulls no punches. You know you want this game. Go to links.pogosity.tv/Skullstompers and play Skull Stompers now.
This one's a short one, but it's good to include anyway just to remind us that defensive gun use happens all the time, even though you never hear about it from the news media, and the gun control nutbars deny it with all the fervor of a creationist denying transitional fossils. And this one is notable because it involves a minor who are supposed to be too immature to use guns responsibly. A 14-year-old boy in Kentucky shot and killed 2 robbers who invaded his home a little after 4 a.m. According to police, upon arrival, troopers determined that the 2 men involved had forcibly entered a residence with the intention of stealing firearms from a safe. During the break-in, a juvenile resident of the home discovered the intruders and saw them holding firearms. The juvenile, acting in self-defense, retrieved a handgun and shot both men before escaping through a bedroom window. The boy was alone at his home and used a handgun that belonged to his father. He isn't in custody and no charges have been filed. So tell me, what kind of person would actually think it's better for this 14-year-old boy to be dead? I just do not get the cultish, sociopathic thinking of the gun control nutbars. And I just want to remind you that burglars enter a home generally figuring no one to be there. When they run into a homeowner, their instinct is often to react with violence, especially when you're dealing with a child outnumbered 2-1. But guns are the equalizer. No matter how big, strong, and evil they were, the kid was able to defend himself. Here's hoping he can go on with his life without too much PTSD over the event. And here's also hoping they decide not to press charges and social media doesn't give them the Kyle Rittenhouse treatment.
If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv.
So we talked about a lot of scientists, including Jay Bhattacharya, who disagreed with the heavy-handed and authoritarian response many governments, especially the U.S., had to the COVID pandemic. We also covered the Great Barrington Declaration and how that was actually a lot closer to the long-standing scientific consensus than lockdowns and mask mandates. Back in October, he hosted a conference where scholars, journalists, and policymakers could learn to, quote, do better in the next pandemic. He invited public health authorities who had said his approach was reckless and who pushed for the lockdowns and mandates instead. None of them showed up. Now, Trump has nominated Bhattacharya to head the National Institutes of Health and Marty Makary of Johns Hopkins University to run the FDA. Makary was an early supporter of universal masking and vaccines, but he opposed the vaccine mandates and was critical of the way the vaccine was rolled out. Both Bhattacharya and Makary commended Sweden's policies, which, as we covered, never had a lockdown and had a death rate far lower than the U.S. 87% of Swedes had vaccinated, significantly greater than the U.S., despite never having had a vaccine mandate. But Philip Zelikow of the Hoover Institution isn't optimistic that this is going to be more than a political division anytime soon. Quote, the whole COVID discussion turned into culture war dialogue, with one side saying, I believe in the economy and liberty, and the other saying, I believe in science and saving people's lives. Princeton University political scientist Francis Lee, author of In COVID's Wake, How Our Politics Failed Us, says there needs to be a national inquiry into the lockdown and mandate approaches. Quote, this is an open question that needs to be confronted. Why not look back? Whether it's H5N1 bird flu or something else, as we've said before, another pandemic isn't a matter of if, but when. And the big question is, are we going to make the same mistakes all over again? Bhattacharya has called for a study of the pandemic and its policies, although it's unclear as of yet whether Trump would support it. But the new CIA Director John Ratcliffe has reopened the investigation as to whether or not SARS-CoV-2 was the result of a Wuhan lab leak, another possibility that never got a proper investigation. Stanford epidemiologist John Ioannidis said Bhattacharya represents an opportunity, quote, "Until now it has been mostly a war on impressions and media, kind of mobilizing the troops. That's not really how science should be done. We need to move forward with some calm reflection, with no retaliation." Public trust in the health establishment was severely damaged by the mishandling of the pandemic, with existing plans either proving faulty or being ignored entirely. Even former NIH Director Francis Collins said, quote, "We totally blew it." And as we covered, it was about completely screwed up priorities, quote, "You attach infinite value to stopping the disease and saving a life. You attach zero value to whether this actually totally disrupts people's lives, ruins the economy, and has many kids kept out of school in a way that they never quite recover from." But the politicized atmosphere led to shaming of anyone who dared to stray from the prescribed writ. Infectious disease Dr. Monica Gandhi defied lockdown orders and kept open Ward 86, her clinic treating 2,600 HIV patients at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital, patients who still needed to be treated, otherwise they'd get incredibly sick and possibly even die. She said it was very much a product of elitism since the rich, quote, "were happy to be shut down and the poor struggled and struggled." One of her assistants told her, quote, "My 8-year-old is at home, on Zoom, all by himself. I have to work, and he doesn't know how to learn that way. There's no one to give him food." Despite having far stricter and longer mandates, lockdowns, and school closures, the U.S. death rate from COVID was the second highest in the world after Bulgaria. And Gandhi basically blames TDS, quote, "If anyone else was president, we would have had a better result. But if Trump said the sky was blue, then goddammit, the infection disease doctors disagreed." It's just as Ioannidis said in his closing remarks at the conference, quote, "We let children down. We let poor people down. We let our future down." And that should never happen again. The biggest lesson is that science must never be authoritarian. But as long as government is in charge of it, fat chance of that.
I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv.
And now it's time to expectorate this week's biggest bogon emitter. Google's war on ad blockers continues, and their public enemy number one has always been uBlock Origin, the open source ad blocker that has versions on basically every browser ever. Google, which makes its money from ads on YouTube and other websites, has been trying to find excuses to block it for years. Now, if you go to uBlock Origin on the Chrome Web Store, it says, "This extension is no longer available because it doesn't follow best practices for Chrome extensions." The Add to Chrome button isn't displayed anymore, and if it's installed, there will be a Remove button instead. There are also reports of Google disabling uBlock Origin on browser restarts in early Canary builds, which generally means the main browser version will do so in the coming months. The excuse is that Manifest v2 extensions will need to be disabled by Chrome, and although Google says users can re-enable the extension, that ability may be removed eventually. Most Chromium-based web browsers will follow, although some such as Brave seem to be sticking with Manifest v2 support. Firefox is likewise supporting Manifest v2 next to Manifest v3. The main difference is that Manifest v2 extensions have unrestricted access to web pages and can interact with the web APIs, allowing them to modify page content to do things like, well, blocking ads. Manifest v3 places greater restrictions on what permissions extensions have and requires them to work with service workers. One excuse is that v2 represents a security risk, but v3's requirement of static rules prevents ad blockers from dynamically updating block lists or using heuristics to determine what ads and other page elements are undesired, many of which pose a privacy or even a security risk to the user. Not being able to dynamically change those rules is like preventing an antivirus from updating itself without a reboot. There is a v3 version of uBlock Origin Lite, but it's a larger download since the block lists have to be installed with it, and they can only be updated by an update to the extension itself. The store page for uBlock Origin still works in Brave, Vivaldi, Edge, and Opera, so it seems that Google is checking the user agent for the browser. So if you want to keep using it, the options seem to be using one of those browsers or to use a Firefox-based browser instead. Raymond Hill, developer of uBlock Origin, says that it works better in Firefox anyway because of capabilities that just aren't there on any Chromium-based browsers. The bottom line is, you should be allowed to have full control over what does and doesn't run on your machine. It's wrong for Google to deny that, and doubly wrong for Google to lie about it just because it threatens their bottom line. So all of that makes Google this week's biggest bogon emitter.
Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins.
And now let's overcomplicationization-ify this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
And this week, it goes to Chuck Todd for resurrecting the long-debunked Russiagate hoax. Yes, the whole Robert Mueller Steele dossier Pissgate Kremlin asset crap. Seriously, how freaking desperate do you have to be to still be sticking by it? He wrote on X, something folks ought to reacquaint themselves with, and then link to the American Constitution Society's link on the key findings of the Mueller report. Your reminder that the Mueller report itself said that there was no evidence whatsoever of Donald Trump colluding with Russia. It also turns out to have been paid for by Hillary Clinton and her campaign along with the DNC, and using as a source known Russian agent Igor Danchenko. His comments come after Trump opened peace talks with Vladimir Putin to try and stop the war in Ukraine, which of course has all the warmongers and grifters of the military-industrial complex in a tizzy. So apparently, the only way they have of discrediting the peace talks is to reanimate this zombie investigation. Seriously, this is up there with claiming that Kyle Rittenhouse killed 3 black men. he was immediately reamed en masse by the collective memory of the internet, including by Glenn Greenwald, who posted, "Playing all the old hits, because in desperation, what else do they have?" Chuck Todd implies Trump is a Kremlin asset in response to his comments on war in Ukraine by telling people to read the Mueller report. Laughing with tears emoji. Journalist Jim Stinson replied, "The report was a failure, Chuck. Deal with it." Further, the obstruction case cites non-cooperation with the inquiry by the president, including requests by the special counsel for an interview. He has that right under the Fifth Amendment, dummy. Skeptical Stoic replied, "Reacquaint themselves indeed," and included a screenshot which read, "The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities." Whale Psychiatrist replied with, "Holy desperation, Batman," and a meme of Georgios Tsoukalos with Todd's face superimposed over it, only instead of saying aliens, he's saying Russia. The most popular reply was a graphic of a frog sitting in a corner wearing a dunce cap with text reading, "Frog of Shame." If the Frog of Shame gets more likes than the original tweet, then your tweet really sucks. As of this podcast prep, the frog got 982 likes to Todd's 354. So basically, Todd wanted to remind us of the report that found that the crap we'd put up with for 3 years, involving one insane allegation after another, being belted histrionically around social media and the news, was a complete load of stinking crap, and that we can't trust any of the people involved in it. Yeah, I don't think that was the message he was trying to send. So all of that makes Chuck Todd this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this You Rat Catcher edition of the Bogosity Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support, and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Ray Bradbury. "The major networks, the cable networks, they're being prosecutors. They're judges and jurors and executioners. Well, come on. That's ridiculous. But they're doing it." The Bogosity Podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Bogosity.